Good morning, everybody, and thank you again for joining me on this new journey in app development, specifically predicated around the Give Grab game and the Nakama gaming server. When I first made the Give Grab game, it was very basic, very simplistic. I couldn't even put it on the app stores because it was too basic. So today, I want to see how I can take that same basic game and make it more lively. Add some things to it that real games have. Authentication, profiles, notifications, friends, groups, leaderboards, all those things that can make a very basic game come to life more. As you can imagine, this is going to be a pretty lengthy series, and I'm going to attempt to go into as much detail as I can about everything I'm working with. But I'm very hopeful that you're able to learn something from this, as well as code along with me if you're able to. The whole goal of the series is for me to continue to learn, continue to teach, and in the end, make a game more pleasurable for all of its users. The first thing that we need to do in this series is focus on setup and cloud deployment. This is going to include everything from the actual configuration of the server, how to build Docker images locally, how to then make a instance or environment of our gaming server using a Docker container, and then how to interact with that server once it's online from the Flutter app, essentially laying the groundwork for how the Give Grab game will communicate with the gaming server. I'm in the main project, the Give Grab client. I've pretty much split this project out into 4 different parts right now. The Give Grab game, the Give Grab UI, the Give Grab client, and the Give Grab server. They're all serving different purposes. The game is the game itself, UI for different components for things that I would need as far as like forms or maybe just miscellaneous widgets. Then we have the actual client app here, which is going to be used to communicate with the gaming server. And then the Give Grab server is going to be the actual gaming server itself. So before we get any deeper into this series, I thought it'd be a good idea to demonstrate the actual game itself, just to show what we're going to be building this gaming server for and with. I'm going to go ahead and start this project. I'm also going to be running this application as a Mac OS app, just because I want to switch it up from doing iOS and Android. My goal is to try to get 20. We'll go 25. If I can get 25 every demonstration, that'll be cool. All right, cool. 26, I'll take that. That's the Give Grab game. And the cool thing that we're going to be building is an actual gaming server, like I mentioned. So this is the Give Grab client. I have the Give Grab server here, and the actual setup for the server is pretty simplistic. If you come over to heroilabs.com/docs/Nakama/server framework, you can then see different runtime options that they have. They have TypeScript, Go, and Lua. I guess I just kind of got thrown into Go and just felt like it was cool. I didn't really try anything else. I know a little TypeScript. I've never heard of Lua, but Go does a pretty good job. So I'm using the Go runtime for this entire series. And on the documentation, they have a very detailed explanation of what the code should look like, the steps that you need to take for generating different parts of the app, descriptions on what methods you need to run to build certain things. They have full templates of the actual Docker file and the Docker Compose. So it's not a strenuous task. Just run through this and you'll have this exact setup right here. I do want to point out that there is one file that doesn't come from the site, and that's this Docker cleanup. I had AI write this for me, but essentially it's going to be responsible for running Docker Compose up, essentially creating the container and then tearing it down whenever I may need to clear it out for whatever reason. So this is just a easier and more efficient way for getting the gaming server up and off the ground. The Docker Compose.yaml, which has the services that we're going to be using, Postgres and Nakama. The Docker file, which will help us build the container. GoMod and GoSum. These are just generated when you're building the project. The local.yaml is the configuration for the server itself. Right now, the only one that's in there is this logger, which we have set to level debug, and the console, which has username and password credentials. And then finally, we have the main.go. This is the main entry point to all the code that we're going to be building on the server. So anything in regards to, let's say, creating a leaderboard, we would throw into this method right here in order to get recognized when building the server. Now, to make sure all of that is running, I'm going to run that Docker cleanup script that I mentioned earlier. Docker cleanup script. It looks like everything was good, so I'm going to go over to the browser, go to localhost, which is 127.0.0.1, port 7351, hit reload, and the server's running. Now it's running locally, but it's going to be the same interface either way. There's a lot of things to explain with the Nakama dashboard, but just for this episode and the next episode as well, accounts will be the main thing that we'll be talking about. User accounts are different from user management. Those are more admin specific roles, but user accounts are for people that have been authenticated to your app, who want to play your game, view your content, or whatever they want to do with your app. Right now, the only user is this super user, I guess you could call it, with all these zeros as their user ID. But this is good news. That means that we have our server running locally, but the main goal is to now get it on the internet, because it makes no sense to have a gaming server that's only running locally. There's no competition in that. So let's go back over to the server project, and what we're going to do is we're going to be building this server and hosting it on DigitalOcean via a droplet. And a droplet is essentially a mini server that you can use for a plethora of different things, but I've chosen to use it today for a gaming server. So we could build our container or our environment on the droplet itself, but that would require more resources of the droplet and would in turn probably cost more and take more time. So what we can instead do is build our container locally, then push it to DockerHub, which is another website that acts as a repository for different Docker containers. And then our gaming server can reference that image, making it a little bit more efficient when it comes to dealing with different containers for the application. So to do that, first let's log into Docker with the Docker login. I've already been authenticated to the app. Trade codes, as you can see, it says login succeeded. So the next thing that we want to do is we just want to actually build the container. And we can do that. Let me get some more space here. We can do that by running docker build with a tag -t, and then it's going to be the repository that you've created on DockerHub. So actually I can show you that. So right now on DockerHub, the only repository that I have is tradecodes/gifgrab, and that's the same one that we'll be pushing this container to. So tradecodes/gifgrab. Then we need to specify the tag, which is going to be latest, and then add a period just to represent the context of the project that we're building in. All right, I have a few warnings down there, but nothing too serious. So the image has been built. Now we can push it up to the repository on DockerHub. So now we'll run docker push tradecodes/gifgrab latest, and it looks like that was pushed. So if we refresh this, it says that it was last pushed less than a minute ago. Perfect. So we have our image here. Now we can head over to DigitalOcean. I did a video in the past about how to spin up a droplet on DigitalOcean and then use it for something like Nakama. I'm not going to explain all that today, but I'll drop a link to reference the previous video where I went into detail about how to do that. So for now, I'm going to go into the droplet, go to the console, and this is where we'll be adding the same files that we have locally, or just two of the files that we have locally. The docker cleanup.sh, the docker cleanup script, and the docker compose.yaml. These two files will let us build the same container that we did locally on the server. So I'm just going to copy the contents from docker cleanup.script. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. So I'll create a file, same file, touch docker cleanup.script, then nano into it so we can make edits. Copy, save, copy and paste, save. So that file's taken care of. And now we need to do the same thing for the docker compose.yaml. Touch docker compose.yaml. Copy and paste, save it. And we have the files that we need to build this. Now there is one thing that we need to modify on the Docker Compose, however. In the service that we have for Nakama, we have this build property with this dot, but this is saying that we're going to build for the current context that we're in. But remember, we're going to be building from that image that we built, or that's sitting on DockerHub, to save us a little bit of time. So instead of the build, we're instead going to put image, because we're referencing the image that's in that repository. Image tray codes / gif grab latest. Oops. That looks good. Save that. And now we're going to do the same thing previously. Run that Docker cleanup script to get the server started. Now, there might be a permission issue here. Yeah, because I just created this file. Okay. If you run into a permission issue like I did, run chmod +x and then whatever that file is. So now I should be able to do it. Looks like I had a typo, and what is that? Tray code / gif grab pull access. Huh. Oh, Docker Compose. There we go. That was a pretty big typo there. Let's take that out. Let's take that C out there. We don't need that in there. There we go. Save that. Now let's run this again. Whoops. Looks like everything was successful, but there's only one way to try it out. We need to actually, let's go to DigitalOcean so we can get that actual IP address. So back on the droplet, if we go over here to this address that's displayed on the droplet, the IPv4, if we copy that into a new window, this is pretty much our host server. And we have our server here running on the internet. Remember, we're not running locally anymore. We're actually running on the internet via our droplet. Let's go ahead and log in. And we've already seen this, but it just feels cool to have it on the internet now. Accounts cleared out. Sometimes this number is a little off. It may reference a previous batch of data that you may have had, but just know that sometimes it may be out of whack. It may be a caching issue. I'm not 100% sure. But we at least now know that we can connect to our Nakama gaming server online. But we need to now test the Flutter app for connecting to the server online. So let's go to the GIF grab client app. Right here, it's pretty basic. I don't have anything in here. The main app really is just the GIF grab game widget, which is the game itself. It's just wrapped in a material app. I have some utils here for maximizing the window size when running a Mac OS desktop application. Essentially just to make sure that it's expanded as full as it can go whenever the game starts. As far as data, some feedback messages that we'll be using to, whenever we're displaying a modal for a successful request, we already have some pre-filled information to respond to the user with. Some of the global files in here, pagination limit that we'll use later for how many items we want to send or how many items we want back from a request if we're using pagination. Empty profile images, GIF assets for the logo page of the app, nothing too important. And then some test descriptions for when we're creating, well, not when we're creating, when I'm creating the block test of every branch of every episode, but I'm not going to bore you with the test. Just know that they'll be available after every episode. So that's all good. With that being said, let's actually test and see if we can connect to our Nakama gaming server. Now, something also to keep in mind during these demonstrations, I'm going to be running this install script that I have. So I'm going to install some of those dependencies that I have or that I need for this part of the series. And don't mind me, I just have this script that installs Flutter packages. Let me see, where is it at? Yeah, it's called Install Flutter Packages. AI wrote it. Essentially, looks through this folder and it sees what packages I need to download for whatever episode I'm on, just as a way to make sure I don't forget any very important packages in the middle of the demonstration, because that's one of my pet peeves is I'm going to build a widget and I don't have the package that I actually need to build the widget. So the only thing that we needed was Nakama. I believe that's in there now. Yep, Nakama 130. All right, perfect. And on main.dart, all I'm going to do is we want to get a client from Nakama. Client, get Nakama client. And we need to specify the host. And the host is going to be that address where our server is at. We'll paste that in there. And then we also need to specify the server key. And right now that's just set to default key. Now, if that's successful, then we want to get a session from that client. And a session is essentially just you've been authenticated to the app, so now this session represents your time in the app. So we'll call await client.authenticate, and we'll authenticate not by email, authenticate device ID with test device ID. If everything runs smooth, we should get to this breakpoint right here, because that means we now have an active session. So I'm going to refresh. And we got to the breakpoint. We have our session. We can look into that actually. Yep, we got this refresh token. Can I spread this out? There we go. Got the token, got the user ID. I don't have a username just yet, I don't believe. Yeah. Or actually, that's on the account. That's not on the session. That's on the account information. But if we go over to the console, we can see the new user who was given a random username, which was me, has been created. And within authentication, it has the device IDs as test device ID. And there's some other authentication methods that you can use as well, such as Google, Apple, and email. And I'm going to be sure to explain those as well in the rest of the series. But I think this is a good stopping point to at least establish that we're able to connect to our Nakama server on the internet.